You're walking home, it's evening, you haven't done anything wrong, and then a police officer stops you, tells you to put your hands up, and starts patting down your jacket. No warrant, no crime, no explanation. And here's the part that might shake you. In certain situations, that is completely legal in the United States of America, but only up to a point. And that point, most people don't know where it is. I'm David Hanna, and today on Courtroom Secrets, we're going to break down exactly what stop and frisk is. Police can legally do it when they absolutely cannot, and what you should do if it ever happens to you. Stay with me, because there's a detail near the end of this video that could genuinely protect you or someone you love. Here's what I want you to think about before we go into this story. Most people believe that in America, a police officer needs a warrant or at least a really solid reason before they can touch you or search you. And mostly, they're right. The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures. That is your constitutional right. It's been there since 1791. But there is a legal exception, an exception that the Supreme Court itself created back in 1968. And that exception has led to some of the most controversial, emotional, and legally complicated moments in American legal history. By the end of this video, you're going to understand something that most people, even educated people, get completely wrong. About their rights on a public street. And you're going to see it through the story of a man I'm going to call Marcus Webb. It's a Tuesday night in November, Chicago, Illinois. Temperature dropping fast. Marcus Webb is 26 years old. He works as a shift supervisor at a warehouse on the south side. He's been doing overtime all week, 12-hour shifts, barely sleeping. This particular night, he gets off at 9:45 p.m. and he starts walking to the bus stop about 6 blocks away. He's got his work jacket on, steel-toed boots. 2 blocks from the bus stop, a police cruiser slows down beside him. The officer rolls down the window. The officer says, "Hey, stop right there." Marcus stops, because that's what you do. The officer gets out of the car, his partner stays in the vehicle, and the officer says, "Hey, sir, I'm gonna need you to put your hands out to the side." Marcus asks calmly, "Can I ask what this is about?" The officer says, "We got a call. Someone matching your description in this area. I'm gonna pat you down real quick." Marcus hasn't done anything. He knows he hasn't done anything, but he also knows that arguing on a dark street at 9:45 at night is not the same as arguing in a courtroom. So he stands there, hands out, while a stranger in a uniform runs his hands along his jacket, his waistband, his backpack. And in that moment, Marcus Webb has one question that nobody is answering. Is this legal? The officer finds nothing. Of course he does. Marcus is a warehouse supervisor going home after a double shift, but the officer isn't done. He asks Marcus for his ID. Marcus hands it over. The officer runs it. Clean record. Not even a parking ticket. And then the officer hands the ID back, says, "Have a good night," gets in his cruiser, and drives away. Marcus stands at that bus stop for 20 minutes in the cold. And what he's feeling isn't relief. It's anger. It's confusion. It's that particular feeling that a lot of Americans know. The feeling of being treated like a suspect when you've done absolutely nothing. He calls his cousin when he gets home. His cousin says, "Man, you should have refused. They can't just search you like that." His neighbor says, No, the police can do whatever they want. Just be glad nothing happened. His coworker the next morning says, "Yeah, you could probably sue them." 3 different answers. All three people are confident. And here's the thing. Tree, you're die. None of them are completely right. Because the truth about stop and frisk is more complicated than most people realize. And it lives right at the intersection of your constitutional rights. And a 1968 Supreme Court decision that changed everything. Let's go back even further. Because to understand what happened to Marcus, you need to understand a man named John Terry and a detective named Martin McFadden and a moment in Cleveland, Ohio that ended up changing American law forever. It's 1963. Detective Martin McFadden is a 30-year veteran of the Cleveland Police Department. He's standing on a downtown street corner when he notices two men, John Terry and Richard Chilton, walking back and forth in front of a store repeatedly, peering in the window, walking away, coming back. McFadden watches them do this about 24 times in roughly 10 to 12 minutes. He believes, based on his experience, that they're casing the store for a robbery. He approaches them. He identifies himself as a police officer. He pats down the outside of their clothing. He finds a gun on John Terry, a gun on Chilton. Both men are charged with carrying concealed weapons. Terry's lawyers argue the search was illegal. There was no warrant, no arrest, no probable cause. The case goes all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And in 1968, the Supreme Court makes a decision that still affects every single person in this country today. Okay, let's break this down in plain English. No law school required. I promise. The Fourth Amendment says the government, including police, cannot conduct unreasonable searches or seizures. Generally speaking, to search you, they need a warrant based on probable cause. That means real evidence reviewed by a judge. That's the rule. Terry v. Ohio created an exception to that rule, and here is what that exception says. A police officer can stop and briefly detain you, without a warrant, without arresting you, if the officer has what's called reasonable articulable suspicion. Not proof, not probable cause, suspicion. But here's the critical word, articulable. That means the officer has to be able to specifically explain out loud, using real facts and observations, why they suspected criminal activity. Not a gut feeling, not a general hunch, specific, observable, explainable. And if, during that stop, the officer reasonably believes you might be armed and dangerous, they can conduct a pat-down of the outer surface of your clothing. Not a full search, not inside your pockets unless they feel something that could be a weapon. A pat-down, sometimes called a frisk. That is stop and frisk, legally speaking. Now, here's where it gets really important. There is a clear legal line between a lawful Terry stop and an unlawful search. Number one, the suspicion has to be specific to you in the situation. Not just you were in a high crime area, not just it was late at night. Sure, those things alone are not enough. Courts have said this repeatedly. Number two, the detention has to be brief and investigatory. They can stop you to ask questions. They cannot hold you for 30 minutes while they run every database they have access to, unless they have a reason to escalate. Number three, the frisk, the pat-down, is only legal if they have genuine reason to believe you're armed and dangerous. It's not automatic. They stopped you for suspicious behavior? Fine, but they also have to have a specific reason to believe touching you is necessary for their safety. Number four, if the stop is unlawful, if there was no real articulable suspicion, then anything found during that stop can potentially be thrown out of court. Evidence obtained illegally cannot be used against you. That's a real legal protection. And number five, this is one people miss all the time. You have the right to ask calmly and clearly, am I being detained or am I free to go? Just secure, let's see. That is not obstruction. action. That is not resisting. That is you exercising your constitutional right to know your own legal status in that moment. Now, back to Marcus. Was what happened to him legal? The officer said there was a call, someone matching his description in that area. If that's true, if there genuinely was a recent call describing someone of his build, his clothing, in that specific location, then under Terry, the stop may have been lawful. It's not comfortable. It may not feel fair, but legally, it might have crossed the threshold. However, if that call didn't exist, if the officer fabricated or exaggerated the justification, then Marcus's Fourth Amendment rights were violated, and he would have legal recourse. That's the difference between what feels wrong and what is wrong under the law. Sometimes they're the same thing, sometimes they're not. Hey, real quick, if this is genuinely teaching you something you didn't know before, go ahead and drop a like on this video. It sounds small, but it's how YouTube decides whether to show this to more people. And more people knowing their rights, that matters. It sounds small, but it's how YouTube decides whether to show this to more people. And more people knowing their rights, that matters. All right, back to it, because here's where the story gets even more interesting. Marcus is a smart guy. The next day, he does something that a lot of people don't think to do. He calls a civil rights attorney, not to file a lawsuit, not yet, but just to ask, was what happened to me legal? And here's what the attorney tells him. She says, Marcus, based on what you've described, here are the questions that would matter in court. Did the officer document the stop? Was there actually a dispatch call logged at that time in that location with your description? Because if there wasn't, if that justification doesn't exist in any record, then that stop was almost certainly a violation of your Fourth Amendment rights. And then she tells him something that genuinely surprises him. She says, the real problem isn't just that it happened to you. It's that most people in your position don't know to ask those questions. And because they don't know, the violation goes undocumented. Undocumented means unchallenged, and unchallenged means it keeps happening. That is the twist in this story. Not a dramatic courtroom reveal, something quieter and more important than that. The system, the legal system, the constitutional system has protections built in, real ones. But those protections only work if you know they exist, and if you're calm enough, informed enough to invoke them in the right way. Most people either fight back in a way that escalates the situation dangerously, or they comply silently and walk away feeling like they had no rights at all. The truth is you have rights, significant ones. You just have to know how to use them. Okay, let's get practical, because I don't want this to just be an interesting story. I want this to actually help you. If you are ever stopped by police in a public place, here is what you should know. First, stay calm. I know that sounds simple, but physically, keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden movements. Your physical safety matters more than anything else in this moment. Everything else comes later. Second, you have the right to ask, am I being detained or am I free to go? Ask it calmly, not aggressively, not sarcastically, just as a clear, direct question. The officer must answer that. If you are being detained, they are obligated to have legal justification for it. Third, if they say you're being detained, you can calmly ask for their name and badge number, note the time, the location, anything you can remember. This is your right, and this information becomes crucial if you later want to file a complaint or consult an attorney. Fourth, you are not legally required to consent to a search in most circumstances. If an officer asks, can I search your bag, and you say yes, that's consent. And a consensual search is almost always legal because you agreed to it. You can say calmly, I do not consent to a search. You can say this. It is legal to say this. I need to be very clear here. Oh, that's sure. Refusing to consent does not mean you physically resist if an officer proceeds anyway. Do not physically resist. That is a separate legal issue and a separate physical danger. If an officer searches you unlawfully, the time to challenge that is in court. 3. 5. 3 or with an attorney not on the street in the dark. 5th, after the encounter is over, write everything down as soon as you're safe in as much detail as you can. Time, location, what was said, what happened. That record could be critical later. And 6th, know that civil rights attorneys often offer free consultations for exactly this type of situation. The ACLU, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and local civil rights organizations exist precisely because these situations happen. You don't have to navigate this alone. Your rights are not just words on paper. They are real, but they work best when you know how to use them calmly, clearly, and legally. If you're watching this channel for the first time, I want to ask you something. How many of these things did you already know, and how many are genuinely new to you? Drop it in the comments. I read them, every single one. And subscribe to Courtroom Secrets, because what you don't know about the law doesn't just leave you uninformed, it leaves you unprotected. That's why this channel exists. Real law, plain language for real people. Marcus Webb, our fictional Marcus, but a man who represents thousands of real people. Right? I went home that November night feeling powerless, but here's what I want you to take from his story. That feeling of powerlessness, in many cases, it's not because you have no rights. It's because nobody ever explained to you what those rights actually are. Nobody sat down with you and said, here's the law, here's the line, here's what you can say, here's what matters. The Fourth Amendment has been in this country for over 200 years. It was written because the founders knew what it felt like to be stopped, searched, and treated like a suspect in your own home, on your own street, in your own country. They built a protection against that into the foundation of this nation. That protection is yours. It belongs to you, not just in theory, but only if you know it exists. Know your rights. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because the next person this happens to, it could be someone you love. And maybe, just maybe, they'll remember something they heard on Courtroom Secrets. I'm David Hanna. Stay informed, stay safe. In our next video, what happens when police ask to come inside your home and you let them in without realizing you just waived your Fourth Amendment rights at the front door. One word, one moment, and the entire case changes. That one's coming very soon. You do not want to miss it.